everybody. My name is Tracy Heilers. I'm founder and executive director of the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. Got my t-shirt on here. And this is our first time doing a webinar format of our equity-based conversation series with our president, Tovi Scruggs-Hussein. Prior to this, we've had 4 conversations in the fall, or 3 in the fall, 1 last month. So it's a new series. We were glad to have Tovi join us as president this past year. It's made a ton of difference for support for me as being a new leader. Our organization is, I think we're in our 21st month, so we're a very new nonprofit organization. But we're trying out the Zoom webinar format, see if we like webinar format versus just a regular meeting format. So I'm gonna pass the baton to Tovi in a minute, but I just want to explain how we're going to work the Zoom webinar. What we'd like everybody to do is either, as you're listening, well, first, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like to say a little bit about yourself, so that we have 41 attendees right now, which is fabulous. I think we had almost 150 register. So we're recording this, and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll have the link to the recording in the newsletter. So chat and introduce yourself. Also, if you'd like to ask a question, if as you're listening a question pops to mind, either type that in the Q&A, so you just hit the click Q&A and type it that way, and I will keep an eye on those. Otherwise, if you'd like to ask your question in person, because we like it to be conversation format, raise your hand, and then I'll click on, once it's time for Q&A, I'll click on you in the order in which you raised your hand. And then at the very end, if you have any questions about the coalition in general that maybe I can answer, we'll do that. Let's see, was there anything else I was going to cover? No, I think that's it. So I'm passing it over to you, Tovi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tracy. And again, thank you so much, Sharroky, for joining us, or Dr. Hollie. Sharroky and I go back a long ways. We'll get more into that shortly after we do what we do here at COSEM. We've got people joining us from Michigan, Ohio, Rhode Island, Chicago, New York. So we've got California all over. So we're going to do like we do, and that is our mindful minute. So we're going to take a moment to settle in to a moment of mindfulness because we believe in it and we practice it. And this is another opportunity to do so. So I just simply invite you to lightly close your eyes or to gaze down. And just take 3 deep breaths at your own pace. And then just simply breathe in a rhythm that feels comfortable for you and still brings your breathing down deep into your belly. Moving our breathing away from our chest area and breathing from our belly area. And perhaps simply just noticing, savoring the stillness. Noticing any bodily sensations, from slowing your breathing down to maybe breathing a bit differently. How is it landing for you in your body? And now I invite you to think of a positive thought. And as you think of that positive thought, perhaps bring a slight smile to your face. And I'll ring the bell. And when you can no longer hear the bell, please open your eyes. All right, COSEM family. As we go into our deep dive with Dr. Sharroky Hollie, founder of a great school of excellence, I hope he shares a bit about that with us. He and I go back well over 20 years to the days of San Lorenzo High School when I started using his book as a tool for my staff to embrace equity and to embrace high academic standards that can be done with equity. Because a lot of folks think that those things are not synonymous when they're absolutely synonymous, because it's around relationship, it's about cultural responsiveness, it's about so much more. And he's definitely an expert in the field, so I don't want to take up too much of the time. I am going to ask him a few questions just to get us warmed up, and then really turn over the mic to him, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So, Sharroky, do you have a personal mindfulness practice?
You know, if you probably talk to my inner circle, they would say no. But from my perspective, I do. And the reason why they would say no is, let me go back. First of all, glad to be with you, Tovi. We go way back. I want to let everyone know that you were one of the most awesome principals that I worked with ever, you know, not only in the Bay Area, but just across the country. I always respect people who get it, and you definitely got it. And we were able to do some positive work there in San Lorenzo, you know, the best we could with what we had. And so I just wanted to just honor you and say I'm proud of you. You know, you've been, you know, moving along. So just glad to be with you. I was totally shocked when I got your, you know, when I got the invitation. I'm like, what? Who? Right? I thought maybe your car ran out of, your battery went out on the 405 somewhere, and you knew I lived in LA, so you wanted me to come help you or something. I don't know. So good to hear from you. That's all I'm saying. Right. So now I had to say that. And then I got to give a shout out to a couple of my folks I see on the chat. I see Felicia from Minnesota. Way to go, Felicia. Thank you for supporting. And of course, Nicole. There may be others, but those are the two that I saw pop up. So I just want to show some love to my folks out there. And so to your question, you know, I'm gonna be honest with you. I was a little, you know, if you go back, I'm gonna say maybe 15, 20, maybe 15 years, I was a little bit anti-mindfulness in a way, because I felt like those are my angry years. And I felt like it was like an Eastern practice that had been co-opted by Western, you know, kind of like the West perspective. And, you know, this whole idea of like, you know, feeling like I'm heading out to like Santa Monica to practice mindfulness. It was just a conflict for me that took me a long time to get over. But, you know, I matured. I grew up, you know, I feel like I evolved, and just in the past, probably, I'm going to say 5-6 years. I mean, it's something I felt like I've always done, but not in a like structured way, like the way that you just did it, or not in a formal way. But I would always, you know, take moments to just kind of listen in, not listen out, you know. I think in my work, or anybody's work, for, you know, you have to do that. And I would always do it like before I would go on with a big audience. I would always take a moment, you know. That was my common practice. But in the past 2 years, someone bought me Calm, the subscription, like as a message basically. And I started using Calm when I would board flights, because I'm typically early boarding, and I have a lot of time as, you know, other people boarding. So I would use that time before they close the door to practice mindfulness. And, either with something structured through calm, or sometimes I would just, and I've been doing that regularly for the past 2 years when boarding flights, getting on planes. So it's been a long, I've gone the whole arc in terms of use of mindfulness. So it's something that I feel like I've personally incorporated. But if you were to like ask me, I probably would kind of be curmudgeon-y about it though, like, right. But deep down, it's something I think is important. I value.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I really love the listen in instead of listen out.
Yeah.
Definitely tapped in. Before we move into the actual work of CLR, I'd like to hear from you, because when I teach and I talk, I talk to people about self-care and resilience and what it means as it relates to our work in equity. And you're an equity warrior, you're a racial healing ally. What does it mean to have a resilience practice or have some sort of self-care? How do you cultivate that for yourself doing this very difficult work of creating equity in our schools and with our teachers?
Yeah, that's I think resiliency is so relative, I definitely think for me, like, I've had to develop a thick skin along the way, and also accept the fact that this work comes with 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it's nonlinear, it's nonlinear work. And that's helped me fight, like my mentor, Dr. Norma Lemoyne, she used to always say that it's always going to be a fight. It's always going to be, this is always uphill, right? And in fact, if you're not going uphill, you may not be doing the work. If you're not fighting, you may not be doing the work. And in my presentations, I always talk about the word struggle, and that if you're really going to do this in an authentic way, then you must expect struggle. And I think that that's part of all the resilience, is accepting the struggle, accepting that it's uphill, accepting that it's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and accepting that you have to have thick skin because you're going to take hits. When I'm working with teacher leaders, I tell them, if everybody is feeling good about what you're doing, then you're not doing something right, because everybody should not be feeling good. You should be creating some discomfort. You should be ruffling feathers. You should be causing people to question, and they're going to lash out at you, but that's expected. That's part of what you need to be resilient. Also think that not so much for me, because my work is isolated in some sense, and the people I look to are like the Dr. Anthony Muhammad's of the world, the Dr. Lavelle Browns of the world, right? People that I kind of just connect with because we kind of do the same thing in the same way. But I do think that it's important to have like an accountability partner, somebody that, you can kind of check in with and say, hey, am I on target here? Am I off target? Am I reading too much into this? That's important. That's part of the resiliency as well.
Wonderful. And very critical that people really start to understand that more, that it's not just strong leadership qualities, but there's these inner qualities and the sense of disruption that gets created, I think, even to like your inner spirit and your inner world in the work that we're doing in the outer world is so critical. And that is why, as well, that we stress the mindfulness piece. Absolutely. Because of what that does for our nervous system, what that does for our sense of wellness and connection to ourselves to do this powerful work. I would love for you to talk about social emotional learning and how that connects to your work. Perhaps how you saw that connection maybe at your own school or just in moving forward as you developed your work more and more. And from there, just go into your flow. Just go into your flow of what you're going to teach us.
Okay. So you say you don't ask me any more questions, just roll into it?
Yep.
Okay, I saw a couple of more. I want to give a shout out to Dr. G from St. Louis, Dr. Janita Williams. Very similar to you, Tovi, excellent principal. And now she's doing her own thing. And then Paris Brown from LA, who is a teacher in LA Unified School District, former AMP facilitator. I just saw her pop on the screen too, so I just want to show some love. There she goes, whoop, whoop, that's her. That's Paris, and that's totally Paris. She'd be saying that if we're in person or on virtual anyway. Okay. So, you know, the social emotional learning thing is the way that I've had to approach it is, unfortunately, you know, a lot of schools that I work with, a lot of districts that I work with, they are using SEL as a way to not be culturally responsive, right? And that's a major problem for me. Same thing with, to be honest with you, with mindfulness as well. I think that a lot of schools, some schools have tried to say, you know, this is not about these kids' cultural backgrounds. They just need to calm down. I've heard that. That's been said to me, right? So therefore, Sharroky, we're not going to do cultural responsiveness. We're going to practice mindfulness, right? And so, and the same thing has been applied with social emotional learning. So what I've been doing is helping districts and schools separate students who need SEL support versus students who need validating and affirmation, and getting a clear understanding of how those two work together. But sometimes they're two different things. And when we mix them up, we cause a lot of confusion, right? There's a district here in California that had an incident that was racial based around the Jewish community. I won't name the district. And the answer, when it was in the newspaper, the answer from the district was, we need to do more SEL work. No, I mean, yeah, we need to do, but we also need to do some racial healing work. We also need to do some education around religious cultures, right? So it's that kind of thing that I think we have to be careful. Now, that said, when I see it practiced as I think it should be practiced, I think it's of great benefit to our students. And our school, which was the Cultural Language Academy of Success, it was an independent charter school that was a model of the approach that I am teaching. It was a laboratory school that many folks came to from across the country. It came a little bit after, because our school existed from 2003 to 2013. But I know, just as a leader in the school, I could easily recognize when students needed more of a social emotional support, and the CLR part would only take them so far, right? And so what I try to tell folks is that culture is not going to solve everything, right? And there are going to be some students who are going to need different types of intervention beyond culture responsive piece. And that could be SEL, that could be trauma informed, that could be the mindfulness, and so on and so forth. So I think that what I'm trying to help schools do is have a better job of kind of deciding what is what students, and not have just kind of like a blanket kind of like, oh, you know, they need just one thing, because we know our students come different. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And different students need different things. I don't believe CLR is a magic bullet or a magic, you know, for a child, but I don't think any other approach is either, right? And so it's all about differentiation. So my work then becomes very specific in that, for those of you who are new to the work, you know, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that people understand that there are forms of cultural relevancy. They're not all the same. So we have cultural competency, we have cultural proficiency, we have cultural relevancy, we have cultural responsiveness, we have cultural sustaining, we have cultural compatible, you know, like I can go on and on and on. So the first thing I'm trying to say is, you have to know your brand of cultural responsiveness. Just like you have your brand of whiskey, your brand of tequila, your brand of toilet tissue, whatever, right? And so you have to know your brand. So our brand focus on culture, language, and responsiveness. That's where the CLR part comes in, right? And it's the definition is that we're going to meet the students where they are by validating and harming them for the purpose of building and bridging them to academic success in the context of school culture. So the mnemonic of our work is validate and affirm, build and bridge. And when you validate and affirm, you make legitimate and positive those things which mainstream media, institutions, social media, and research have been deficit about as it applies to marginalized cultures and languages. That means that these students come to school and they're met with a deficit orientation. On the news, they're met with a deficit orientation. On the with social media, I don't even have to get into it. So a CLR educator is one who validates and affirms the students by providing a counter narrative, right? And the counter narrative is you commit to talking to the students differently. You commit to strong relationships. It's not enough to have a relationship with a child. You have to have a strong relationship with these children. And we've seen this play out in this COVID crisis, because teachers have been saying, the students that I had strong relationship with, I didn't have any problem connecting with them. I didn't have any problem with them responding to my emails. But the students that we did not have strong relationships with, those are the ones who went ghost during the COVID era. And the attitude of the student was you weren't concerned about me then, so why are you concerned about me now, right? And I'm just saying that from the student's perspective. So we want you to talk to the students differently, relate to them differently, and lastly, teach them differently. So what we're saying is we're going to give you a set of activities that you can do that will be validating and affirming to who the student is from a cultural linguistic perspective, okay? And at the same time, we're going to teach you the expectations, the norms of school culture, which is really whiteness, right? We don't really say that publicly, but since we're friends, since we just talking, we can say that, right? But we're not placing a value on it, right? So I'm not coming at it from like the angry white man and white, we let other people do that part, right? What we're saying is it is what it is, no different than my famous example is being in the DMV. Like, to me, the DMV is the most mundane cultural thing that you can do. When you walk into the DMV, there's certain cultural norms, there are certain cultural expectations, right? I give the example of you can't use if you stand behind the line at the front and they're talking to the person using sociocentrism, and they're going on and on to the break of dawn, and everybody in the back is going like, come on, right? Why? Because in the DMV, sociocentrism is not valued. You got, can I help you, sir? Yes, I'm here to renew my license, right? You can't start getting into, your wife left you and, she took the paperwork and, you can't get into all those issues, right? So my thing is that there are just institutional norms that are at play that we all sort of build and bridge to as adults, and we want to teach those to the kids. I call this situational appropriateness, and it's defined as what is the most appropriate cultural and linguistic behavior for the situation without losing who you are culturally or linguistically, or feeling like you have to give up who you are. So even when I go to the DMV and I have to practice a more linear conversation pattern, I don't want to feel like I have to give up my sociocentrism, right? And this is what we're trying to replicate for the student in the schools. So our thesis is students come to school with valid cultural and linguistic behaviors that are misconstrued by school culture that lead to a series of inequities as they matriculate through the system. That's our thesis. And so our work is about really unpacking that. And so we do that by working with teachers around not going punitive, negative, and consequential when students do things that are cultural. And what I mean by that is we separate race from culture, and we focus on the concept of culture, and we focus on the rings of culture, which are really multiple identities that our students come to us with that are beyond race, such as gender, such as age, such as socioeconomic. And these are all culturally based. So I have a student who's behaving a certain way. As a teacher, I'm being an anthropologist, and I'm saying, where is that behavior coming from? Is it age? Is it ethnic? Is it socioeconomic? And whatever it is, I'm going to validate and affirm it, right? I'm not going to buy into the cultural understanding that I may be having. So we work with teachers on identifying those cultural behaviors. We focus on 16 in particular. I just described one called sociocentrism, but there are 50 more we do, ranging from eye contact, which is a very simple one, to immediacy, which is very nuanced because it's intangible. You really can't see it, you can only feel it, right? And the immediacy is that sense that students feel connected. They feel the love, they feel the care in the room, so that it creates a sense of immediacy for them, right? It's like, I had an experience this last year where I walked in a classroom to do an observation, and this young African-American boy, he just came to where I was, right? And he was just in my face. You know, our students are, right? And he felt connected to me, right? The teacher introduced, and he started asking me a question, you know, you're a doctor and all this kind of stuff. That's what the sense of immediacy is, right? It's very nuanced though. So we go over these 16 behaviors in our professional development. We want teachers to recognize their biases as they apply to these behaviors. So if I have a biases with sociocentrism, then as a teacher, I need to recognize it and allow myself a first thought, last thought dynamic, right? So I'm talking and I see two kids chatting to one another. My first thought is going to be quiet, stop talking. But in our approach, it's not going to be that way. We're going to say, is it cultural? And are those kids actually practicing sociocentrism? And even though it may seem like they're off task, but we know from classroom management research that 70 to 80% of the time they're talking about what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to go punitive, negative, or consequential. I'm going to validate and affirm and then build and bridge, which may mean I may say something along the lines of, I love how you are engaged in our lecture right now, right? And saying, right, or stop talking, or I'll wait, you know, these things that we say. And so, and then I'm going to say something like, in a few moments, I'm going to get to hear what you're going to say, right? As soon as I finish my 7-minute lecture, because typically what's happened is the teacher's talking so long, the kids are like, you know, I got to say something to my neighbor, but this teacher going on and on to the break of dawn, right? So we try to help teachers say, keep it short, let them engage, and then bring it back. So that's really like a simple example of what we're trying to do with teachers around these 16 behaviors. So you have to be aware of your biases. So that's a big piece of our work. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time on it, but I do say that you have to be aware of your blind spots around these behaviors in order to be culturally responsive. And then we give very specific activities. A lot of them are Kagan, come out of the world of Spencer Kagan, but we do others as well that teachers get to practice. And then the example is like, if you allow for more discussion in your classroom, you will lessen sociocentrism because students are having more opportunities to talk. So that's what we're trying to do. We're big on movement for the kinesthetic piece, letting kids get up. I say, you know, secondary classrooms twice every 50 minutes, elementary 3 times every 50 minutes. And so that helps with classroom management in general because you just get kids more engaged. But we also deal with academic vocabulary, academic literacy, and academic language, as those are the gatekeepers to success for our students. So that's that's in a nutshell of what we're trying to do. And obviously, you know, I think that mindfulness fits in a lot of different places, but the one thing that I want is for teachers. This is why I love the work that you're doing. We need teachers who have themselves, you know, at a place and space that they won't be so reactive, right? And they can keep that peace. And you probably won't remember this, Tovi, but I never forget one time I was in your office. We were talking, and you had some students just burst in, right? And was sent to the office, and I remembered, you know, the first thing you did to them was you did this kind of thing right here, which was telling them to bring it down, and that was validating and affirming those students. And then you said to them, I'm going to hear what you have to say. Because those students at that moment, they didn't feel like they were being heard, right? And so you have done a whole bunch of stuff. Just get out of here, blah, blah, blah. But the first thing you have to say, like, and they did. And yep.
A little bit. Every once in a while you cut out back and forth, and I had other people are noticing.
Okay.
I don't know or where your mic is at, if when you move it's
okay. All right. That's just the universe telling me to shut up, so I'll stop.
Also, if you have a lot of open windows while running Zoom, it can pull on your bandwidth. So just something to think about.
Okay.
Open windows on your computer.
Oh yeah, that might be okay. All right.
It wasn't too bad. It just happened a few times.
Okay.
Thank you for that example, though. I vaguely remember it now because you did this, and I remember kind of like that would be what I would do.
Yeah.
You made some really valuable comments and sharing, and also in ways that you've shared their approach. And another way that it really connects to mindfulness is in terms of connecting with our biases. And believe it or not, mindfulness really is an equity tool in helping us to de-bias, because it's about being present and awareing in the present moment, being so aware in that present moment that you're catching what you're naming, that first thought, catching it enough to interrupt it. So there's really beautiful intersection of the culturally responsive work and mindfulness, which is part of why I think people are catching on to it in that way as well. I loved so much around the validate and affirm, and not just any kind of relationship, but a strong relationship, and the situational appropriateness, just absolutely wonderful. And just like teaching is a cyclical path of how we're teaching our students, so is the equity walk. So is leading for equity. And so trusting the process of things. And just giving people a heads up on the call now, one of Sharroky's colleagues is also a colleague of mine, Nicole Luciani Elliott, who's on the call, and she's going to be doing next month. So she's taking a lot of what he has been naming for us conceptually on this call and giving us the big picture of it. She's going to do some deep diving and drilling down into what he's sharing. And so we'll get to that next month. So you have an opportunity as well to, when you purchase the COSEM book, you can also purchase his book, which is really an easy read and gives lots of insight into what he's describing. And so you'll have something to anchor that with. Kim Hendricks from Fresno is also on the call. Carrie Pearson from Texas. Monica got here from Alaska. She made it all the way on our call from Alaska. So it was great to see you, Monica. She's a COSEM member as well. So are you ready to open us up for questions, Dr. Hollie?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, folks.
So
And
is Tracy moderating, or how I wasn't paying attention when you were talking about how are we doing this?
Yeah, we don't have any questions yet, so we were taking a sacred pause here to.
Okay. I see a question.
Any
Okay.
rise of.
people might be typing, and then there, I see the Q&A has a little red dot on it, Tracy.
That was just about his mic.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'll just miss that one.
Yes, monthly meetings. if you're asking about the monthly meetings of the Equity Convo series, we do this every month where we bring in experts in the field and have just a short time with them to really pour into us and really bring equity to the forefront in this way, and let them just simply teach us. And so this conversations vary in what they're about. And we named it a conversation, hoping that there'd be a little more exchange between folks on the calls. That wasn't happening as much. I was also sensing some hesitancy around what people were willing to say on the calls, which was interesting. And so we thought that we changed the format a bit around how we ran the flow. And it seems to be working well, because this is the highest participation we've ever had. I'm not going to let it be because of Sharroky. It's going to be because we changed the format. No, but it's also Sharroky for sure. You can get notified of the monthly meetings by signing up for the COSEM newsletter, and also joining the Facebook page, Educating Mindfully, or Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. So there are different ways to stay connected to what COSEM is up to, for sure.
Yeah.
We have a few questions now. We have 4 questions.
Good.
The first one is from Hannah, and she says she's read some different perspectives on the myth of the culture of poverty versus SES as a ring of culture. Can you talk a bit about coping strategies versus learned cultural behaviors when it comes to SES?
Sure. That's a great question. So, yes, there is a historic issue with how we focused on the culture of poverty that's been stereotypical. And I blame a lot of the work of Ruby Payne on that. Call out. Ruby Payne really did a disservice in the sense that poverty was confused with what I would consider to be more of an ethnic identity, so that was considered more of the behavior of more low socioeconomic across races was pigeonholed to be representative of what Black culture is. Historically, that has really done some damage, because Ruby Payne is one of the few professional developments that literally, some would say, has been in the most districts of professional development. And if you think about that, then it's, it had great influence on the early work around poverty. So a lot of my work is undoing, because people still have that mentality where they confuse low socioeconomic with ethnic identity. So what we try to do is focus on strata and really talk about, there's a middle class, upper middle class, lower middle class, when I say strata, and we're working our way all the way through to lower class in essence. And each of those strata come with a cultural dynamic. And I use a lot of examples of me being middle class and a lot of things I do because of my middle class culture versus when I was poor, because I grew up poor, right? And so I can make comparisons. I'm bicultural when it comes to poverty, when it comes to economics, right? If I need to eat spam, I know how to make it work, right? Because I've been in that situation before. So once we understand that, then we can then talk about what are we going to see with students in the particular strata. And a lot of that has to do with not blaming the students for their situations and really just trying to understand them, but realizing that socioeconomic culture is a culture that's, like most cultures, is fluid, right? And therefore, it's something that we can work with the students. And what I mean by that is, we know, for example, that many students who come from lower socioeconomic situations don't have an abundance of support at home. We already know that. So if I know I'm a Title I school, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that we are putting support in place for our students, because I know they're in homework club. I know they're in the homework club. So I don't even have to like do a survey or anything. I know they're going to need a homework club. And that's how conversation is, how we have the conversation around socioeconomic status. It's not to fit into the stereotypes, but to understand and then be proactive about it. And then, to be honest with you, the great thing about my work is I work in schools that are not Title I. They, in fact, they have, they don't have many poor families. And what we know is that even in those schools that ever is the lowest socioeconomic rung, that student is the one that's going to be underserved. So I'm saying I work in schools where there are working class and middle class students. They're not lower class students in the school. They're not a Title I school. So when you look at that, then who becomes the underserved? It's the working class students. I work with some affluent schools, right? That many of the kids are upper middle class, even upper class, right? Lower upper class. And when you go to those schools, then who's the underserved? Well, it's the kids who are lower middle class. And I can name a district in the Bay Area right now that I experienced it firsthand, but I won't, where I saw that range, right? It's a district where the homes were, some of the homes were $1 million homes, right? And there it was those working class, lower middle class kids who were being sent out of class, who are being blamed for their economic status. So we know it's really not just about poverty, it's about whomever's on the low end, regardless.
Quick question. When you're naming these classes and economic classes, is there a certain framework or chart that you're using that you, in like even in your mind, that you've just been using so long to name these things that maybe you could share with us? Or how
Well, I mean, I originally, I used what the federal government uses as its own metric in terms of the strata. That's what I've always used. And then don't ask me right now, but there are a couple of books that I refer to in terms of just looking at economic status, more coming out of the research of economists than education. Yeah.
Yeah. Ms. Tracy.
I'm peeking to see maybe what question would be a good, if I just go in order, if I, okay. From April, she says, can he explain a little bit more about how SEL, validation, and affirmations can work together?
Sure. I think that this is I want to make, what I'm trying to protect is I don't want the child to be seen as a problem. That's what I'm trying to protect.
Say that one more time. You cut out. You don't want those.
I don't want the child to be seen as the problem, right? And so I think that sometimes we have to be careful with the SEL that something is wrong with the child, right? And so validation and affirmation protects us. To me, it's like a protectant, if you will, because when you validate and affirm, you start with the institution, or you start with the adult who is coming with something that is deficit oriented, and I'm not saying intentionally, that may prevent them from being validating and affirming, which to me then affects the SEL. So it has a domino effect. So I'm saying that validation affirmation should enhance your SEL if you are applying it according to how we're saying, right? You know, I think it was Christopher Edmond, you know, he got a little bit of heat because he put out, or was it, I can't remember, it may not have been him, but it was someone who tweeted out like, our students aren't being suspended, they aren't being expelled, they aren't being sent out of class, like during this COVID, right? Like how they aren't being told they are emotionally wrong, you know, they're not getting all those deficit messages. So I wonder if they ever want to come back to school, right? And that was just sort of a sarcastic way of saying what we do to kids while they're at school that leads to, you know, the SEL, or maybe, you know, is school a traumatic experience for some of our students, right? That's, so when we talk about CLR, it's meant to kind of be the guardrails so that these things don't go astray. That's how I look at it. That's the relationship.
Yeah, thank you. And then just quickly, someone joined in they're saying, just to speak a little bit more on the branding CRT.
Right. So when I say, I just don't want people to say culturally responsive and then think it's one and the same. That I want people to recognize that there's been an evolution in this work. Gloria Lansing Billings, who's the godmother, put out an article about 4 or 5 years she titled it, "It's Time for a CRT 2.0." And I think that my work and others, the culturally sustaining pedagogy, represents the 2.0. It's the next generation. And I think that the term culturally relevant has been cliched. It's become a buzzword, and it, you know, you said, and then everybody really has a different view of what it really is, especially at a deep level. And so I'm trying to be more precise, more narrow with the term. And I want people to make determinations of no different than, like I said, you buy your products, you know, you buy certain products for certain reasons. Well, I want you to buy into cultural responsiveness for certain reasons and know what you're getting that's different from each one. And I'm saying with our work, then what you're getting is a focus on culture, a focus on language. You're getting the notion of validation, affirmation, building bridge, which for the academics builds off the work of Geneva Gay. Because in her definition, the terms validating and affirming appear, which is what I took to then grow this work from, those two terms. So I definitely follow the lineage of Geneva Gay versus maybe a Gloria Lansing Billings or James Banks or whomever. You can tie my work closely to Gay's work. So I'm just saying, know what you're buying into. Just don't go for the okie doke. Just don't go just because it says CRT or culturally relevant, and you go like, oh, okay, like that's what we want to do, which a lot of districts do. They just want the buzzword, right? They don't want to go deep and see what are the differences and what is the focus.
I think that was really helpful.
Very.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. Are you seeing the questions, Tovi, at all that you'd like to? There's 5.
No, they're in the Q&A. I did not open it. Sorry.
Let's see.
Okay, I like this one from Jan. Dr. Hollie, I loved what you said about the work making colleagues uncomfortable. How do you get them to even start the work if they are so uncomfortable?
Right.
In 3 minutes.
In 3 minutes. Okay. Well, we have to start either 1 or 3 places. We have to start with that our hearts and minds are already in the right place and we're ready to go to the next level. Or we have to start with a sense of urgency, meaning that there's some type of issue at play at the district. It may have been a racial incident. It may be something around Office of Civil Rights. It may be something around disproportionality. But there is a sense of urgency and you have to leverage that urgency. Or it starts off with vision. You know, you need a leader, a principal, a superintendent, a school board who has the vision of moving this work forward. And that's the impetus that we need. You need one of the 3, right? You need either we're doing this because it's the right thing to do. We're doing this because we got some heat on our butts and we got to make a move. And I've been in a lot of situations. Again, I won't mention the Bay Area districts, but my first district that I worked with in the Bay Area, they were under Office of Civil Rights Order. And the superintendent told me, this is why you're here, because of this OCR. Or you need just a superintendent or a principal who just has a vision for the work. And he or she is just trying to move the district forward. And I think that a lot of teachers, they just need to be told this is going to be uncomfortable. And a lot of times they've been told that it's going to feel good, like there's going to be a feel good approach. And once they know, I liken this work to getting an injection. You know, there's a little pinch at first, right? And that's what we got to let them know. Like, this is going to be like, you know, getting a B12 shot. You know, I use a B12 shot as an example, because the first time I got a B12, I raised up my sleeve for the nurse to give it to me in my arm. And she told me, what you doing? You need to turn around. So I didn't know that you could only get a B12 shot in one location, right? And I think that teachers need to be told that this work is like a B12 shot. And you're going to have to turn around to get the shot. And then they'll know going in that they're going to have that uncomfortability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Any closing thoughts before we transition?
No, you know, I just want to thank you and the organization. I mean, I did not have awareness prior to the invitation. And so it's good to have a reference point, because I do get questions a lot around things that teachers can do beyond CLR. And I'm definitely going to reference them to Educating Mindfully. And also, when I see schools not properly using it, I'm going to say, hey, you should check out this organization. So my parting words is just thank you. And I'm hope that by you getting more people online here, that we can bring more awareness to the great work you're doing. And, you know, I started a podcast, was part of my silver lining in this COVID situation. So I'm hoping that you will reciprocate and in the future come on my podcast to do that. So just thank you. That's my final words. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for giving up your valuable time. We know you have a little more time now since you're not flying all over all the time. And so we just really, really appreciate you contributing to our equity conversation series and bringing your expertise and just all that you carry. It's just really been such a blessing for us. And the comments are just coming in so positively. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, folks, we like to be as on time as we possibly can. So I want to be sure that everybody is aware that on June 17th at 2:30, so it'll be 4:30 CST, we will have Nicole Luciani Elliott, who serves as the coordinator for Sharroky's organization, which is Center for Culturally Responsive Teaching and Learning, as well as an instructional coach and professional development associate. She's spent the last 19 years, or before that, 19 years teaching history and English at an East Bay Public High School, which you have heard of on this call, San Lorenzo High. Nicole and I were baby teachers together, fresh out of teacher school, 22 years old. And so we go way back as well. I will not say publicly that Sharroky poached her, but anyway, just teasing. Absolutely a beautiful transition. Because she literally brought his work alive at San Lorenzo High in ways that our whole staff of over 80 teachers absolutely, you know, didn't see just coming into doing our book study immediately. And she really put in so much energy around bringing our entire staff. So that too was a way to bring the equity work forward. Use your teacher leaders. Our teachers are such geniuses to bring equity work and creativity alive in this way. Absolutely. Because they do teaching all the time. And so, I mean, she just was so amazing that she really was able to just spread her wings in some other ways and just bring it alive. So I encourage everyone to get Sharroky's book, to again ground yourself in some of the teachings and the learning. And Nicole is going to be with us on June 17th to drill down, to give us some specific instances and lessons that we can take away with us, especially in this time of distance learning. Ways that you can support COSEM, absolutely critical. It starts with you. So how can you commit to 1%? You can go to the COSEM website, sign the pledge to committing to 1%. Okay, and definitely doing that. I also have a free ebook that talks about setting up your sacred space. So if that helps you do your 10 minutes each day, because you have a special place for it, then those tools work in conjunction. Please buy the book, Educating Mindfully. Okay, I have it right here. Okay, stories of school transformation through mindfulness. Sharroky will be sending you a copy as gratitude for your time today. You all, this is a field guide, 40 different good stories about how to do what we do. Starting a COSEM chapter or practice group, and of course, donating to COSEM. We are launching a Racial Healing Allies e-course. It will be live. It is hosted by me and 2 other members of COSEM. Registration is officially open on my website, and 20% is being donated to COSEM. We believe in the coalition that strongly. Okay, so we are really making that donation, making the support mutual, and feeding the organizations that we know will change the future of education in our schools and change the future in a space that allows us to love our children. And when we love our children, we have those strong relationships. When we love our children, we validate and affirm. So closing out on my end, I turn it over to Tracy.
Thank you, Tovi. Thank you, everybody, and Dr. Hollie. And for everyone who attended and had questions, we didn't get to all the questions, so hopefully you can attend next month, and then we can, because some of these questions I see are more specific to a school, and so that might be great ones for Nicole to answer as well.
You can either answer them, or maybe they can even populate them on the Facebook page, and we can ask Dr. Hollie to pop in and maybe just answer a few on the Facebook page. That'll be great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. All right, let's just close out with just a few breaths, collective breaths together, in appreciation of our time together today. And just knowing that we have each other as we continue this work together. So that's the main reason COSEM came into being, so that as we're on these journeys together, transforming schools, that we can connect and mentor each other. So we're here for you. We can, in any way, just shoot me an email and I can help get you to the person that I think will help you most. You can reach out at hello@educatingmindfully.org. So we're officially done here with, and Dr. Hollie has to get going. I'm going to stay on a few minutes longer. If anybody has a question, a COSEM related question, chapters, or anything else like that. But otherwise, thanks everybody for coming.